All right. Good morning and good evening, partners and colleagues. I hope everyone has been keeping safe, healthy, and well. I am Ivan Christian Dimpuco, Project Co-Manager of the Clean Energy Investment Accelerator, or CEIA Philippines, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the kickoff dialogue of CEIA's Industry Dialogues on achieving corporate renewable energy targets in the Philippines. Through this kickoff dialogue, we hope to increase awareness among stakeholders on the current status of the Clean Energy Option Program, or GEOP implementation, identify gaps that still impede local and international companies to procure RE, and gather solutions that can be relayed to government bodies and decision makers for immediate actions. Next slide, please. To start off, I'd like to give a quick background on CEIA. So the Clean Energy Investment Accelerator, or CEIA, is a public-private partnership that addresses barriers to clean energy deployment in the commercial and industrial sectors in emerging markets, which include Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. The CEIA is jointly led by the World Resources Institute, or WRI, Altro Partners, and the U.S. National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or the US NREL. Each member brings a unique set of technical expertise to ensure successful country-based efforts led by local and regional staff, which is all supported by a wider global team. CEIA partners with large energy purchasers to send a strong demand signal and deploy clean energy, and collaborates with governments to strengthen policy frameworks to grow clean energy project pipelines. Next slide, please. CEIA acts as a bridge, translating international commitments into on-the-ground market transformation. As demonstrated in today's convening, high-level commitment platforms, target-setting protocols, reporting methodologies, and business coalitions, including Philippine industry stakeholders that can benefit from CEIA's local presence and expertise, as CEIA brings together in-country coalitions of private sector, public sector, and utility partners to overcome barriers to clean energy procurement and investment among energy users, especially commercial and industrial, or C&I. Next slide, please. So just a quick snapshot of what to expect in today's kickoff dialogue. Marlon will provide the details of the specific objectives, but generally, this is really aimed at enabling and or expediting corporates to procure renewable energy at scale in the Philippines. This is within the context of present regulatory realities vis-a-vis the ambitions set by companies to contribute meaningfully to decarbonization and net zero pathways. After this quick introduction, I will turn over the floor to my colleague Marlon Apanyata to further discuss opportunities identified and challenges that need to be addressed in terms of GEOP and RE procurement in the country today. Afterwards, we will have a panel discussion in which we will be joined by two internationally headquartered corporates and get their insights on the challenges and opportunities of RE procurement from the perspective of each of their companies. This will then be followed by a presentation on innovative procurement methods implemented globally to be discussed by our guest from the U.S. National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or US NREL. We will then conclude the program with a moderated discussion on outcomes and strategies before wrapping things up with discussion of next steps. Next slide, please. So today we are joined by amazing experts who have agreed to impart their knowledge and experiences to help us achieve our objectives for today's activities. And we will also be getting to know them a little bit more later in the event. So we have Mr. Evan Scandling, Sustainability Manager from Recreational Equipment Inc., or REI. We have Ms. Maria Christine Ponce Garcia, Sustainability Lead representing Nestle Philippines. Joining us as well is Ms. Ella Cho, Senior Model Engineer from the U.S. National Renewable Energy Laboratory. With that, I would like to introduce my good friend and colleague, Marlon Apanada, who will moderate today's dialogue. Marlon is the country lead for the Philippines of the Clean Energy Investment Accelerator and Southeast Asia Engagement Lead for the World Resources Institute, or WRI. Marlon is a certified green finance specialist, bringing 16 years of in-depth experience in the clean and sustainability spaces. Marlon, the virtual floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Ivan. Good morning and good evening, partners and colleagues. We are looking forward to the kickoff industry dialogue to support scaled RE procurement in the Philippines. As we continue the discussion, next slide, please. Let me show you a quick slide on the timelines of the market-making mechanisms under the Renewable Energy Law. So this is a way for us to contextualize today's discussion on RE procurement options for commercial and industrial consumers. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Since the RE law was passed in 2008, the government has been continuously rolling out policies that aim to contribute to the promotion, development, and utilization of RE sources in the Philippines. So in 2012, the feed-in tariff mechanism was implemented, which mandates the grid to take in a volume of renewable energy at a set price. That has allowed our wholesale electricity spot market to accommodate at least 2,000 megawatts of new RE capacity since the RE law was set in place. In about the same year, 2013, thereabouts, net metering was rolled out, which allows customers of distribution utilities to install on-site renewable energy facility for their own use. And that surplus generation can be exported to the distribution grid. In 2017, the Renewable Portfolio Standards, or RPS, was signed, which mandates distribution utilities and electric cooperatives to procure a portion of their electricity supply from renewable energy sources. And in 2020, so this is fairly recent, the Green Energy Auction Program was launched, wherein the market participants bid for the lowest price for a portion of megawatts that has been allocated, much like a reverse feed-in tariff program. And the Green Energy Auction Program awarded its first batch of winning bidders about a week ago, a volume of close to 2,000 megawatts of RE. So that will add on to new RE capacity in the Philippine grid. Now, the Green Energy Option Program, although it was signed last 2018, only started in earnest in January 2022. So the first transactions were seen to be fully implemented in January 2022. It is unique because it provides a window for commercial and industrial customers to procure off-site RE, and that is the reason why we will be focusing on the GEOP today, because that is the RE law mechanism most relevant to corporates that have renewable energy goals. Next slide, please. So in a nutshell, the GEOP allows qualified commercial industrial customers to bypass the incumbent utility and source straight from registered renewable energy suppliers for up to 100% of their energy needs for potentially lower prices. So what we mean with qualified C&I customers are those with monthly demand of at least 100 kilowatts, and bypassing the incumbent utility means migrating to these qualified renewable energy suppliers under the Green Energy Option Program. Next slide, please. So with this, we see that off-site power wheeling is available in the Philippines, and there are two ways where this is done. First, via the Retail Electricity and Competitive Access, or RCOA, where a portion of electricity may be generated from renewable energy sources. And this is applicable to so-called contestable customers or end users with monthly peak demand greater than 500 kilowatts. Then there's also the procurement or power wheeling via the Green Energy Option Program, which offers 100% energy generation from RE sources for users with a monthly peak demand of at least 100 kilowatts. So the main differentiator is RCOA is not limited to 100% RE, and RCOA has a higher retail choice threshold of at least 500 kilowatts, at least for how it's configured today. So this makes the Green Energy Option Program, or GEOP, a more viable option for corporates that have RE and net zero goals and targets. Next slide, please. So here, for this slide, we show the challenges and opportunities for different sorts of commercial and industrial end users based on our conversations with early mover corporates in the Philippines and with various Green Energy Option Program renewable energy suppliers. So we have broken we have broken this down to three. So we have first the Green Energy Option Program qualified C&I customers with their own facilities. Then we'll talk about those that are qualified, are GEOP qualified, but they don't have their own facilities because they're leasing. And then the third one that we're gonna discuss are those that may own their own facilities but are not yet qualified under the GEOP because their consumption is less than 100 kilowatts. So on this slide, we show the opportunities and challenges of the first set of possible C&I customers, those that are qualified for the GEOP and they own their own facilities. So the opportunity here is that they have the option to choose and procure 100% renewable energy to enhance brand and reputational standing. And as RE sources like wind and solar have dropped in prices between 80 to 85% versus their 2010 levels, GEOP could provide least cost power to these C&I customers. We also see as an opportunity those local supply chain partners, especially of those multinational corporates. They can now comply with their HQ's RE mandates. And we note that there are close to 400 companies that have set 100% RE targets via platforms like RE100. And there are several other platforms such as RE100 that convenes coalitions of corporates towards high ambition renewable energy targets and net zero goals. So that's the opportunity. The challenges, though, for the Green Energy Option Program, as we've seen, are first the low switching rate. There are only 68 facilities registered from 49 unique customers. So this is 6 months into the implementation of the GEOP, or now 7 months. The numbers are not as high as we've expected. Only seeing less than 70 facilities registered in the 7 months that we have the GEOP. Take note that the GEOP has been announced 4 years ago, and so this low switching rate is notable. Part of the reason is many customers are not aware on how to take action and start the process of the Green Energy Option Program. And there's also knowledge gaps on the program itself among distribution utilities, especially those that are not outside the capital. So this Green Energy Option Program requires the energy end user and the distribution utility to work together because a migration is involved, and the knowledge gaps among these DUs contribute to the low switching rate. Part of the other challenge that we've seen in Green Energy Option Program is the unintended advantage for renewable energy suppliers that have hydro and geothermal assets because of the way that the policy has been set. And we've also noticed and observed some renewable energy suppliers, despite the low switching rate, already have fully contracted supply for the rest of the year. So that means that there, apart from the low switching rate, there's also a constraint in supply for RE, and we could trace that back to some requirements of the Green Energy Option Program that require 100% migration. Next slide, please. So that's one subset of energy end users. You're qualified to procure RE under the under the Green Energy Option Program, and you own your facility. But what if you are qualified to switch under the Green Energy Option Program, but you don't own your facility. You're leasing the building or the facility. So there's an opportunity there to engage with the building owner or the facility owner to unlock win-win arrangements by switching electricity source to pure 100% RE. The building owner could save on costs. And the lessor, which is you or the corporate, will be able to comply with your program of actions towards your 100% RE goals or net zero goals. But the question mark is direct procurement of 100% RE among lessors allowed? That is the toughest question that we've faced in our conversations with many corporates in the Philippines, since a huge portion of them do not own their facilities, especially those that are multinational brands or subsidiaries of multinational companies. They're leasing buildings. How are they able to procure 100% RE if direct procurement is a question mark? So that points us to the challenges that we've seen. Some CNI customers have sufficient demand that can qualify them for the Green Energy Option Program, but they're unable to participate because they are not the facility or building owners. And we've also seen that facility building owners are oftentimes not aligned with the lessor's renewable energy and net zero goals and targets. So that's a gap and challenge that we hope to discuss and find solutions for in these industry dialogues that we are setting, with this being the kickoff one. Next slide, please. And then there are those brands, corporates, multinational supply chain partners, and other companies that really want to procure 100% RE, but they do not yet qualify. They don't yet qualify for the to the 100 kilowatt retail choice threshold set by Green Energy Option Program. So under the opportunity there, though, is that under the GEOP, it leaves open the possibility of lowering the retail choice threshold to below 100 kilowatts. So as we can see on the screen, there's a way to expand retail choice given engagement with the Department of Energy, engagement with the National Renewable Energy Board, and alignment with other industry stakeholders. We also see this being an opportunity under ARCOA, under the Retail Choice and Open Access, because phase 5 of the ARCOA, which is proposed to be effective by January 2023, there's a retail choice could be expanded to SMEs and household levels. So it lowers down the contestability threshold to at least 10 kilowatts. So there are the opportunities for those that have lower than 100 kilowatt demand, but challenges remain. So policy inertia, given given that the GEOP is still being implemented in its current iteration, how can this proposal be pushed? There's also expected pushback from incumbent energy stakeholders, including utilities, because retail choice, expanded retail choice means loss of revenue, potential loss of revenue for them, and carving out captive customers from them. And then there's also the possible impacts to the distribution system once more lower load customers are able to freely choose their choice, their source of energy. And there's also maybe some a prioritization issue. Some groups are looking at improvements in the current GEOP policy rather than pushing for expanded retail choice. It's not necessarily either or, and both can be done simultaneously. But that's what we're hoping to get the thoughts of from industry stakeholders on what could be done together to address these challenges. So those are across three subsets of possible corporate corporate end users of energy, C&I customers. That's the scene right now on how they're able to or unable to procure renewable energy. So we hope that with our panelists, they could share their RE procurement journey, their net zero goal journey, and guide us as industry participants and stakeholders on creative and maybe innovative thinking on how to address the challenges that we've pointed out. So with that, I turn the floor again, so to speak, to Ivan to help us, to steer us towards the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marlon, and interesting slides right there. And we would like also to proceed now to the panel discussion on the challenges and opportunities in RE procurement to get the perspectives from our international corporates who are here this morning or evening, wherever you are. So let me first introduce our panelists. So first off, we have Mr. Evan Scandling, who is a sustainability manager with REI, a US-based outdoor recreation retailer and brand organized as a consumers cooperative. So Evan focuses on accelerating energy decarbonization within product manufacturing with REI supply chain partners and also with other outdoor brands. Next panelist, we have Ms. Christine Ponce Garcia. So Christine is the sustainability lead of Nestle Philippines, Inc. She is a key driver of the strategic execution of the company's net zero carbon emission commitments and leads the sustainability initiatives of Nestle Philippines. So Christine is also the chairperson of the Environment and Water Committee of the European Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, or ECCP. She was awarded as Nestle's Women Mover in 2015 and Baguio's Outstanding Women Leader in 2016. She is the founder of Womentor, a mentoring program for young women, and a co-founder of Gandang Pilipina, a social media campaign for body positivity. So before we proceed and hand it over back to Marlon for moderating this event, we would also like to request the audience, the attendees, please feel free to send in your questions by typing it in the chat box, or you could just freely raise your hand and we can acknowledge you later, so you can unmute yourselves, turn on your video, and ask your questions live. So with that, welcome Evan and Christine, and I turn it over back to Marlon for moderating this panel discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ivan. Christine and Evan, thank you for joining us today. To kick things off, maybe you could share the main reason for your company to adopt 100% renewable energy goals, if ever there's one. And in doing so, how do you start, and have there been challenges encountered? Then For the challenges, identify what internal and external factors have you observed. So I turn this over first to Evan. So Evan, care to share your thoughts?
Happy to. And did we want to use PowerPoint slides or skip those?
Yes, if you have PowerPoint slides, we'd love to see them.
Sure. Why don't we start that for context? If Ivan, you're able to screen share those. But I'll just kick right in with introducing REI, and Ivan already gave a quick overview. So we are a brand and also a retailer. So that makes our job in the supply chain decarbonization that much more complex, in that we have our own brand and our own set of supply chain manufacturers that we work with, which I know we have at least one in the audience today that we work with in the Philippines. So that's great to see. And that's, of course, its own set of emissions within that value chain. But then it's also important to recognize that as a retailer, we retail products from about 1,500 other outdoor brands, selling everything from tents to hiking poles to hiking boots to sleeping bags, and hundreds of more products. And those companies and those products that we retail also fit into what we call our scope 3 emissions. So our job at REI, now that we have a very clear scope 3 emissions reduction goal, is to tackle both the emissions for our own brand as well as the products that we're retailing. And just quick kind of high level, why is, to answer Marlon's first question there, why have we set a goal? In our case, one, we're just like many other businesses, the thousands of other businesses around the world, including my colleague and Nestle, many other businesses that recognize that a world that doesn't address climate change means a world that's harder to do business in the future, and even starting today in many cases. So that's a given. But also in REI's case, our entire business, which was started about 90 years ago, coming up on 90 years ago, has from the beginning been built around the idea of accessing the outdoors in a healthy and fun outdoors. And if climate change increasingly impacts that is a direct challenge to our business. So for us, I think we're in a unique position that our entire business is built around a healthy outdoors. So we very much take our climate commitment seriously. If you want to go to the next slide real quick, I'll spend maybe 3 or 4 minutes going very quickly, and then happy to open this into more of a discussion. But just on this slide here, the real main point is REI as a company has been doing things around climate and emissions reductions for many years now, going back a decade plus. But the but to that is that the majority of those efforts has been focused on what we call our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions in the United States, mainly where our stores, we have about close to 175 stores in the United States, as well as our offices and distribution centers. So the emissions associated with the energy scope 1 and 2 is where we've been focused in the last decade plus. As noted in the slide, we've been 100% renewable electricity going on a decade now. So we've seen a lot of successes domestically here in the United States. But the big shift for us, and this is why we're here today and engaging with our suppliers in the supply chain, is because the next slide, if you can skip to the next slide, Ivan, is really the big change for REI came in 2020 in terms of really shifting our climate strategy. Both the big things were to, one, make sure that we were in line, our climate goals were in line with the Paris Agreement. So making sure that any emissions reductions that we do are in line with that 1.5 degrees Celsius global temperature average scenario. And then the other big change that we instituted with our climate goals in 2020 is making sure that we're covering all scopes 1, 2, and 3. And scope 3 is where our supply chain partners and the retail products that we sell from other companies fall into that. And I'll in a slide or two illustrate what that looks like between scope 1, 2, and 3. But what that all means in terms of our amped up and more ambitious climate strategy starting in 2020 is that we are now working towards a 55% emissions reduction target by 2030 from our 2019 baseline, which all results in, you see this graph here, you don't have to grasp every word or every number, but what it's really saying is we need to improve our emissions intensity by about 7x between now and the end of the decade, meaning for every dollar that we make, we have to reduce the tons of emissions by 7x. So we have a pretty big challenge ahead of us because on one hand, REI, of course, like most businesses, we want to continue growing our revenue and growing our business, but at the same time, we need to drastically pull down our emissions while we're doing the same thing. So that's the context for our climate goals that also include our suppliers, which is why we're here today. So you can go to the next slide, Ivan, and I think the next one illustrates pretty quickly the balance of scope 1, 2, and 3. And just if you look at the left-hand side graph there, it's almost impossible to see because the other colors are very hard, but it's essentially 2% of REI's overall emissions are from scope 1 and 2, while the remaining 98% of REI's emissions come from scope 3, which is both upstream, and that's where our manufacturing is, also downstream after products are sold. But the key message is when you add it all up, and this is the graph on the right there, the products that REI sells add up to about 2/3 of REI's overall emissions. And so that leads to that single bullet point there where we are very confident in REI that decarbonizing that the energy that goes into product manufacturing is the single most important lever that we can focus on to decarbonize and reduce emissions in our scope 3. So that is a big mission and a big central part of our overall climate strategy, is focusing on decarbonizing energy in product manufacturing, both with our own supply chain partners as well as those other brands that we retail and partnering with them. Next slide, please, Ivan. And of course, how do you do that? It's not actually, when you kind of step back, it sounds like a big challenge. It is, but the levers to do that are for the most place available, at least on a global basis. And the three main buckets are energy efficiency, making sure that the facilities that are manufacturing products are using their energy in an efficient way. Number two, which is probably, you see from just the graphic there in the middle, renewable electricity, we think is the most significant and important lever that our manufacturing partners can tap into to reduce emissions. And there's a variety of ways to use renewable electricity. And then lastly, sometimes overlooked, but certainly emerging and certainly important for anyone kind of in the discussion about corporate decarbonization in product manufacturing, is looking at cleaner heat. And the interesting thing why I bring up clean heat is oftentimes the new alternatives to switch to cleaner forms of heat processes require electricity. And of course, you want to have access to clean electricity if you're going to switch from, let's say, example, a coal-fired boiler in your factory to an electric boiler. You want to make sure that electricity that you're moving that boiler to is zero emissions or low emissions. So we know there are solutions there, and there's a variety of them in these three main buckets. And it really comes down to which countries are we and our supply chain partners working in. And that kind of leads into the last slide there of what we at REI and ideally also our supply chain partners across a variety of countries, but including the Philippines, are looking for. So Ivan, if you can scroll down to the final slide I think I have here in terms of some of the key ingredients that you might say. And I think this stuff does have relevance in the Philippines, and particularly with the GEOP, but really whether it's REI, whether it's our supply chain partners, or whether it's one of our retail brands that we're selling, looking for renewable energy, there's some common ingredients that we all look for as energy users and energy buyers. And that's, we want clean energy to be accessible. we want it to not only be available, we want it to actually be transactable and easy to actually step in and sign a contract and start using that. And then secondly, we want to make sure that renewable energy is available in large volumes. And that's one of the things why GEOP is potentially very exciting, knowing that it has the potential, at least, to help industrial energy users procure large volumes, many megawatt hours of clean electricity. Affordability, of course, with any product, whether it's electricity or anything else, you want it to be price competitive with whatever your status quo option is. And that's another exciting thing about GEOP and ARCOA, that those are alternatives that appear to be pretty cost effective. And then the last one, which is important, is looking at making sure that, particularly for us in the corporate world, when we deal with carbon accounting and making sure that what we say is true and that we can verify that, and if we have carbon auditors check that we can prove that, is to have tracking and verification. And so what that really means in this case, in the context of renewable electricity, is renewable energy certificates. And knowing that for every megawatt hour of clean energy purchased, there is a REC that can prove that, and know that we or our supply chain partners are the ones that are getting credit for that, and there's no double counting in the market. So I will pause there. I think hopefully that provides a start of a conversation, particularly around GEOP and where it stands today. But thank you for the few minutes. I appreciate it and look forward to more conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Evan, and thanks for answering our questions and kicking us off with a panel discussion. Now, we'd like to hear from Christine to share your thoughts on Nestlé's RA procurement journey.
Thank you. Can you hear me and can you see my slides?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, just like my partner here, Ivan, I'd just like to give a bit of a context for us to kick off the discussion. Okay. So again, I'm Christine, and I'm the sustainability lead of the Philippines. I'm going to turn off my video a bit. Okay, so I hope everyone is keeping safe during this time. I'd like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to share about what we do in Nestlé, specifically what we do for the environment. So I've been in this role for more than a year now, and I've seen how it is important for us to hold on. Sorry about that. Okay, so I've been in the role for more than a year now. I've seen how important it is for us to work together for the people and the planet. So making our products for sustainably is a key priority of Nestlé. That is why switching to 100% renewable electricity is one of our net zero commitments, which I will discuss in details later on. So I'm looking forward to this discussion on our shared goals, key opportunities and challenges in our sustainability agenda, specifically on RE access here in the Philippines. So allow me to give a bit of background before I discuss our sustainability agenda. So Nestlé has been in the Philippines for over 110 years now. So our administration office is here at Rackwell, Makati, and we are one of the top taxpayers in the country. We have 4 manufacturing sites in the Philippines, 3 in the northern part of the country, or Luzon, and 1 in Cagayan de Oro in the southern part of the country. So aside from our factories, we also have 6 big distribution centers and 1 shared service center in Bulacan. Or this is what we call, this is our BPO, which services almost half of the Nestlé world. So we directly and indirectly employ over 50,000 households. In Nestlé, so we said we're always driven by our purpose as a company to unlock the power of food and beverages to enhance quality of life for everyone today and for generations to come. So this is the why. I think this is what answers your first question earlier, Marlon, on why. Why are we doing this? Okay, but of course, creating shared value has always been the core of who we are at Nestlé. So we focus our energy and resources where we can make the greatest positive impact, not just on people, but on the planet. So last year, we announced our intention to advance regenerative food systems at scale. So the notion behind regeneration that it's not enough to maintain the status quo by preventing more damage to the environment. So we will go beyond sustainability. So we said we need to create a positive impact and make things better than they were before. So an example, for example, would be our deforestation. So before we said we had deforestation was a priority, but this time we say we will fight against deforestation in our value chain. So, but we need to reforest as well. That's why we said we'll plant 200 million trees as one of our targets. So please watch this video to see how we are creating shared value. Could you hear the sound? This will just be cool. Okay, maybe I'm just gonna skip this part. Okay, so we create shared value in 3 key areas. First, for our individuals and families, where we have what we call our Nestle Well Campus here in the Philippines, where we empower almost 11 million children to live healthier lives. And then we also work with the Department of Education on developing solid waste management modules on and climate change. So we also have our communities where we help our coffee farmers improve their livelihood through our Nescafe plan. And for the planet, we strive to ensure zero impact to the environment. So similar to Ivan, recognizing the urgency to do more to mitigate climate change. So we are now focusing on developing and broadening our initiatives. So that's why even before the net zero agenda came out, we've already had our sustainability programs. But this time we said we want to do more. That's why we made a climate pledge to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 at the latest. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with the net zero agenda. So we said if we meet the net zero, we will ensure to help contribute to the Paris Agreement goal, which is to limit warming our planet by 1.5 degrees, and also contribute to the Philippines, to the country's nationally determined contribution to reduce our greenhouse gas reduction by 7.5% by 2030. So this one is my Bible. So what can you see here is something to inspire everyone in the kickoff. So what you can see here is our Nestle Net Zero Roadmap. So I know it's quite a busy slide, and yet others may say it's quite ambitious. Every time we present this slide, the first question what is always, they think that's too ambitious. But I'd always say, but the challenges that we face in the planet demands us corporates to be ambitious and to be this committed. So the Nestle Net Zero Roadmap, as you can see, it's a time-bound action plan across our value chain. So including interim targets, which is consistent with the Paris Agreement. So you can see here, it's a result of our complete review of our business and operations to understand the depth of the challenge and determine the actions we need to address it. So we define our footprint. So we were in the spirit of transparency, we defined our footprints in partnership with South Pole. So you can see on the left corner of the map, that's our footprint, global footprint. And then what we did is we partnered with South Pole, an external consultant in setting our targets, and we followed the Science-Based Target Initiative criteria, or the SBTI. So this is a collaboration of non-profit organization, which is considered the international gold standard on assessing net zero commitments. So we said here in the Philippines, we said that we are fully aligned with the global net zero commitment. And we said as the kasabuhay of the environment, we will strive to have zero operational impact in our operations, and do this in the Philippines through our initiatives in 3 key action areas. We have first, we look at our value chain and ensure we source our requirements responsibly. And then we said we will look within our operations and transform this to ensure zero environmental impact. And then we said, finally, we'll work towards a waste-free future. This means ensuring our packaging is sustainable. So again, you can see in our net zero roadmap, I put them in a box, these 2 boxes, that in the next 3 years, we are committed to operate on 100% renewable electricity in our own sites. And then to reach our 2030 emissions goal, we said we'll also increase the share of renewable electricity, and the share of renewable thermal energy are critical milestones. So alongside the established forms of our renewable electricity, there's also opportunity to work with our suppliers to increase the availability of renewable thermal energy generated from sources such as biogas and biomass by 2030. The good news is 100% already of our factories in Luzon and our administrative office here in Makati is already running on renewable electricity. So, but this is not the same with our Cagayan de Oro factory. I mentioned earlier that we are also faced with, while we are ahead of our targets for 2025, we are faced with a very big challenge now in Mindanao, in our Cagayan de Oro factory. So we have been closely working with other stakeholders to find out how we can accelerate and deliver our plans, because we have been informed, and I think it was also presented as one of the challenges by Marvin earlier, that I think this confirms that the challenges in the sites outside Metro Manila, outside the urban areas. So we've been informed that there is no wholesale spot market yet, which is a prerequisite for an open access and retail competition. So they said that it may take 2 to 5 years for the market to open in Mindanao. And if you just wait for the market to open, we may not be able to deliver our 2025 commitments on renewable electricity. So we were also informed that suppliers cannot compete with the cheaper local price and some security concerns in Mindanao and distribution utilities as presented earlier. So we do not have all the information right now. We don't have also the solutions. So we also hope to find solutions through forums like this. So also alongside, as also I mentioned, that there's opportunity to increase the availability of renewable thermal energy for such as biogas and biomass. So we hope to use more biogas, but apparently we do not have enough in the Philippines. So just like everyone present in this kickoff today, we believe in the whole of society approach in reducing our carbon emissions and achieving our net zero greenhouse gas emissions commitment. So to help deliver these commitments, we all need to create a right enabling environment. So potential areas for collaboration across the private sector, including access to renewable electricity, which is hopefully aligned with regulatory framework, and involving consumers in a wide range of stakeholders. So we also share the challenge of helping encourage more suppliers of biomass or biogas to operate in the country. So it indeed takes a village to achieve our sustainability agenda. So I thank you, CEIA, for forming one of these villages. We need to advance RE in our country. I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion this morning. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Christine. And thanks for sharing with us the sustainability journey of Nestle. Not just sustainability, it's really the net zero, the decarbonization, and the achievements they've had since starting renewable energy procurement for your sites. So I think the goals of Nestle and REI are very consistent. It's really all about making sure that renewable energy is accessible, available in large volumes, affordable, and tradable and verifiable. So for Evan, REI has a 55% by 2030 target reduction. Does that involve supply chain partners in the Philippines, and how are they doing in contributing to that goal? Especially that we have stratified possible C&I consumers across 3 buckets earlier, right?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking that question. I actually forgot to mention that in my opening comments, but yes, our 55% reduction by 2030 in a very large way hinges on our suppliers and REI being able to successfully collaborate with and support our suppliers in reducing their own emissions. And the starting point for that was earlier this year, and just for context, we have about, for our brand, REI brand, we have about 130 suppliers across 9 or 10 countries. Within the Philippines, we have a small handful of suppliers. But earlier this year, for all of our suppliers across all those countries, we asked each supplier to establish an informal science-aligned target. We, of course, encouraged all of our suppliers to set formal science targets with organizations such as the Science Based Targets Initiative. But in lieu of that, we asked our suppliers to establish informal science-aligned targets that were at minimum in line with a 1.5 degree scenario. So that's where we're at as of this year. The next step for us, literally right now, during day to day, month to month, as we do our jobs, is working with those suppliers to now they have a clear path for the emissions specifically that they have to target to reduce over the coming years. Now our job is to help them, support them, collaborate with them to find the right mechanisms and tools to reduce their emissions. And every supplier is going to be a little bit different. Some might focus on energy efficiency at their facility, where others might focus on renewable electricity. But that's the next step for us, is really looking at the solution side. We've now tackled setting targets with our suppliers. Now the next step is really working with them and supporting them on the solution side of the equation.
Yeah, that's very enlightening, Evan, because we now see the journey as it's from a larger perspective. So it's about the work that has been done so far in the US, setting the targets this year and before, and then looking at achieving those targets of today and onwards, right? I think that's how the timeline is looking for companies like REI. For Nestle, that's interesting to know that the situation in Mindanao is as such. I wonder if the Green Energy Option Program is an option towards 100% renewable energy for your manufacturing site there, or has that also been constrained by the lack of the spot market?
Right. Thanks, Ethan, for raising. Marlon, for raising that. We are qualified for the GEOP, so our capacity is more than 100,000. However, I think there's still limitation in terms of implementation in Mindanao. So we're closely working with the stakeholders there and with the Department of Energy and NREP and NGCP to find solutions on how to accelerate the opening of the wholesale market in Mindanao. And maybe it's something we could also work on here in this forum. Also, I'd like to share that I'm inspired with REI's selection for its suppliers. So similar to Ivan's, I think we're in the first phase, which he shared earlier, that our pledge covered scopes 1 and 2 at the beginning of our net zero commitments. But again, we said, almost majority also of our emissions is coming from our suppliers, and we truly believe in also greening the supply chain. So Ivan, I'm really inspired on how you took a step further, and now bringing in your scope 3 or your suppliers to this advocacy. So what we're doing right now is that since we're also signatories to RE 100 globally, and just recently we also signed up to REPH 100. So what we're doing is to also increase awareness on the GEOP and our agenda in the Philippines to our suppliers here in the Philippines, with the hope of having the same vision that Ivan has for REI.
Right, and I'm also curious to know if for Nestle you have 4 manufacturing plants, the Rockwell HQ, 6 distribution centers, and 1 shared service center. Do you own the facility or some of those facilities?
For
are
factories,
leased?
yes. Yes. For the factories, yes. For the distribution centers, some are leased.
Okay, and then
Mhm.
it's also a challenge to do RE procurement for those leased
Right.
facilities, right?
Yes. Because we wanted, though they're not part of the scope because we don't own it.
Mhm.
Right. So, but we
Mhm.
still wanted to because of course of the benefits that the RE brings to our operations. And we wanted also to put our distribution centers to operate on renewable electricity, but it does not fall within the requirements of 100,000. So some of them did not qualify, just a few of them. So that's one, I'm really, it's hopeful to see that we can work together on requesting for the, bringing down the requirement to be able to operate on renewable electricity. So some of our distribution centers did not qualify, so they did not advance in that aspect.
All right, thank you. Yeah. For the audience that we have in this convening, please feel free to put your questions. And we have Christine and Evan to share their thoughts. Otherwise, at this juncture, we can give the floor to Ella Zhou, a senior model engineer at the U.S. Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Laboratory, to share some solutions that she has seen globally for corporate renewable energy. And then we can go back to our panel with all three of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you advance to the next slide, please? So my assignment here is to talk a little bit about what are the options available globally, mainly focus on the United States. I think the purpose for that is to see if some of these mechanisms could be potentially implemented in Philippines, because we also want to drive policy advancement. A lot of the countries we work with, aside from Philippines, we also work with Mexico, Colombia, Indonesia, South Africa, a number of countries around the world. In the United States right now, we see the voluntary green power market has been expanding very quickly. In 2020, the voluntary buyers procured about 35% of total non-hydro renewable energy generated in the United States. And the next slide, please. We have several mechanisms available, and I'll give a quick description of these one by one later, because you already know these. A lot of these by the volume of sales, it's very clear that the unbundled racks account for the majority of the volume of sales. And then the number of PPAs have been rising very quickly. But in terms of participation, so in terms of customer amounts, we see the community choice aggregation program has gained the most number of customers in recent years, while competitive suppliers and utility green pricing has also reached a lot of customers. Next slide, please. This is just a figure showing you that across each of these mechanisms we talk about in green power purchasing, voluntary green power purchasing, all of them have been increasing very rapidly in terms of sales, megawatt hours in the past 10 years. Now we're going to look at them one by one. Next slide, please. I'm going a little bit quickly because I know the audience are already familiar with these terms, and then we are already running a little bit behind the schedule. So, but please feel free to stop me if you have any question or need to need some clarification. The easiest one to do is utility green pricing if the utility offers it. So these begin with a renewable energy generator, and then the utility either owns the generator and retains the racks, or purchase the racks from a third-party owned generator, and then the customers just purchase directly from the utility. This is about the easiest thing you could do if the utility offers such a program. Next slide, please. The second one is utility renewable contracts. So this is also offered through utility, but instead of a green tariff, they offer it in terms of renewable contract. And then sometimes it could be very specific. It could be a wind contract or it could be a solar contract. But other than that, it's very similar. The utilities can procure the power and the racks from a renewable energy provider, and then the customers will continue to pay the utility with a modified green tariff or at a bilateral contracting rate. Next slide, please. So competitive suppliers is very close to what Philippines has implemented in the GEOP. In the US, in liberalized markets with retail competition, the customers have direct access to competitive suppliers of generation services. And then it's also called retail choice. And then the suppliers will compete with each other and with incumbent utility based on price and based on product differentiations. Some competitive suppliers offer renewable energy products either through direct sourcing from independent power producers or by bundling electricity products with energy attribute certificate like RACs. Retail competition allows corporations to search for competitive supplier product offerings that satisfy their own renewable energy demand at competitive rates, often with overall cost savings. Most of the world's major electricity markets, I would say, have somewhat liberalized. Retail competition has been implemented widely in Europe and in parts of the United States, as well as other countries like Australia, Cambodia, Japan, New Zealand, and then Philippines to some extent, with the 100 kilowatt hour rule. Russia and Turkey, and then Mexico is also shifting towards retail competition, and most South American countries have implemented some form of wholesale markets. In the United States, where they have the retail choice, it typically does not have a threshold for 100 kilowatt hour. So even a resident, a single family home, they can sign up for competitive suppliers, and then the contracting period varies. It could be a monthly contract, it could be an annual contract. Next slide, please. Unbundled racks. So a lot of people know this already. So it's sold separately from electricity, typically in an increment of 1 megawatt hours to match renewable energy procurement for some other methods described before, also use certificates for tracking and verification and to enable corporate claims. In some regions, renewable energy purchases based solely on unbundled energy attributes are also possible. And these certificates can be purchased directly from project owners or through third-party brokers, and are typically verified so that the purchaser can claim the sole ownership of the generated renewable energy, regardless of the ultimate destination of the electrons moving around. Several countries and third parties have developed certification-based systems for renewable energy transactions and claim substitution. These include Australia, India, Europe's guarantee of origin mechanisms, Mexico's certificados de energía limpia. I don't speak Spanish, so don't hold me accountable to that. And then these the development of certification systems has provided flexibility and facilitated increasing corporate renewable procurement as certificate-based transactions have become dominant forms of purchasing in some markets, as we've seen in the figures before. Next slide, please. Community choice aggregation is a form of competitive suppliers, and then community choice aggregation are currently available in California, Illinois, Rhode Island, New York, Massachusetts, Ohio, New Jersey. Essentially what it does is the legislature removed some regulations around who controls the electric utilities in certain regions. And it allows for a local municipality to procure power independently. So the municipality can choose to enact a program under these laws, and then the customers within CCA's control are given the option to participate. It's typically through an opt-out model. So the default is enrollment, and then you can opt out if you want to. And then the CCAs often provide a very appealing competitive rate and then more renewable options. Municipalities take on this new role to provide a benefit to the residents. And then within the CCAs, local governments are responsible, are able to go directly to the power provider because they have the aggregated purchasing power, and then they can negotiate contracts on behalf of all of their customers, including the residents and also including CNI businesses. Examples include Marin County, California, Albany, New York, Melrose, and Brookline in Massachusetts. So it could also be a model that Philippines could explore. Next slide, please. Power purchase agreement is probably the most complicated of all the different mechanisms available. It's a contract in which an electricity consumer or an off-taker buys power for a predetermined number of years and a predetermined rate from a renewable energy generator. The third-party owned approach shifts the project finance responsibilities and then the investment risk from the corporation to a third-party owner. There are two basic types of PPA, direct and financial. I'm not going to go into details later, but we can discuss more if you're interested. Next slide, please. So I specifically want to bring up the Green Lease program because I understand a lot of the corporates like REI will own storefronts that are in leased properties. They don't, you probably don't own the entire building. It's probably located in a shopping mall or some shared property. So green lease programs are now also available. These are also called high performance leases. It includes clauses in the lease to equitably align the costs and benefits of energy and other sustainability investment of landlords, tenants, and real estate teams. The developers and landlords providing net zero energy leases. So that's a further restricted type of green lease. They can typically gain 3 to 7% higher occupancy rate, 3.5% higher rent, and then 13% higher sales revenue. So there are some incentives for them to implement green leases for their tenants. The lease processes and the structures typically would include cost recovery pass-through clauses, energy budget, submetering and disclosure, and recommissioning. Again, these are very complicated. I can go into detail in future webinars if you are interested. Next slide, please. Just very quickly, the green leases are not just available in the United States. So in the US, we actually have more than 5 billion square feet of commercial and government spaces now having this green lease program. But it's also available in places like Brazil. So, like this is an example where GTIS is a real estate and asset firm. They implemented green leases in 7 properties in Brazil and are able to reduce the energy consumptions across their Brazilian portfolio by 32% in just 2 years. So that's all for my presentation. Again, this is a lot of material to go through. If you're interested in any of these mechanisms and then to advocate for its potential in Philippines and in other countries, we're happy to assist with that. And then in the next slide is my contact information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. Such a rich set of information, and thank you for kindly sharing with us your expertise and your observations in these markets, especially as they relate to possible solutions for RA procurement in the Philippines. I understand that these are all very innovative solutions in highly advanced markets, so to speak. And they are not yet available in the Philippines. How could you recommend stakeholders like us to work together to implement any one of those solutions that you've identified, especially the green lease, since it seems to be the solution that could address roadblocks for those that do not own their facilities. What observations could you share from the markets that have started these and led these solutions?
Right, thank you. I feel like there are a couple of things we could potentially do. One is to, under the GEOP, for instance, to lower the threshold from the 100 kilowatt hour mandate. And then another thing we could do under GEOP is to allow aggregation. So it could be open to more customers. For the green lease program specifically is, I think we could engage with major real estate owners, asset owners, asset managers, or building owners to show them the quantitative and financial analysis we've done in other developing countries like Brazil. I have given you some numbers, how it increases their occupancy rate, increases the rent, so it will provide these building owners with the incentive to make green leases available for the tenants and their renters.
Oh, thanks, Ella. And for those, for the suggestion to lower the retail threshold, retail choice threshold under GEOP, do you foresee this impacting the overall distribution system when you have lower load customers having lower load customers having retail choice and getting their supply from retail electricity suppliers rather than utility? And any comment on this, on the technical, on any technical ramifications?
No, it's not going to be an issue. I can go very technical if you want, but I don't think it's the right audience for it. But essentially, under these competitive retail choice, what happens is that you're only changing the generation, but the distribution utility still manages the distribution grid operation and manages the reliability under such situations. And then we have, increasingly advanced monitoring and control mechanisms for distribution systems. And then, so this is not going to be a problem at all, because it's essentially the same, customers. They're just switching the generation. What could become, potential issues have a potential bigger impact on the distribution grid will be things like EV charging, like rooftop solar. These things tend to impact the distribution grid reliability and then stability a lot more than just switching a different supplier. So I would say the challenge here is more economical and political rather than technical and then engineering side.
Oh, thank you so much, Ella. And yes, it's time to call on Evan and Christine. If you have questions from the presentation of Ella or any clarifications, insights that you want to share, especially on those solutions that have been identified in other countries, please feel free to share your thoughts. Christine, you want to start?
Yes, I'm particularly interested to the options of maybe our suppliers who are on lease. And so I'm not quite familiar about it, but who should drive this in the Philippines? Who should drive the green lease option in terms of the multi-stakeholder in our space for RE? It's an option, but I don't know who should drive it in the country. And would you share any best practice from other countries where they were able to, offer green lease as an option to the consumers?
And maybe, Ella, as a corollary to that question, I think how did the green lease program actually start in a market like Brazil? And how was that pushed? And who were the stakeholders, perhaps, that were involved in making that into a viable option there?
Yeah, sure. So the green lease, I would say, in the United States, it's a national program. So they started a green lease leader program. It both sets the standards for what constitutes a green lease, and then it recognizes a lot of cross-sector landlords and tenants for creating and implementing these leases. So it built a kind of a best practice database or case for a lot of people to replicate. And then the reason why this model took over to Brazil is that this company called GTIS, it's a major company that owns both properties both in the US and also in Brazil. They found that after they implemented the green leases, they actually got a lot more like financial returns. So they said, oh, why don't we take that same model to Brazil, because they are getting, it's good for their balance sheet. So essentially what I think we could do in the Philippines and in other countries is, and trying to disseminate information about this type of model, trying to engage with both on the government side and also on the private business side, more real estate developers or asset managers, property owners. I think to show them the statistics of examples in other countries where it's good for their bottom line, and then I think they will be more open to develop such green leases.
Thank you, Ella, and thank you, Christine, for that exchange. At this point, I also want to talk about the issue of RECs. One of the pervading questions and uncertainties in the Philippines is the viability of RECs as a tool, given limitations on how they're treated. For domestic compliance markets, or B for allowing corporates to procure RE. Evan, you may want to share some thoughts on what could be possible solutions to unclog this issue of uncertainties over RECs in the Philippines.
Yeah, it is the question when it comes down to renewable electricity procurement in any market, but it's definitely pertinent since the GEOP rolled out earlier this year. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert in terms of navigating the intersection of voluntary REC markets and compliance RPS markets. So I don't have a magical solution to offer. But what I do know is what the corporate side needs out of a program. And I'm just thinking of what Ella said. I appreciated she cut through a lot and got to the point of, I think she was talking about the leasing program, but she said it's not a technology problem or financing. It comes down, I forget the words, but in this case, we know that the GEOP program, it doesn't come down to technology or economics. We know all those stack up. It really is a regulatory or a political issue. And if those things can be sorted out, we know the other pieces are there for a successful GEOP program. But in terms of what the solution should look like, I don't know how to get there, but what the solution hopefully can look like to facilitate more corporate buyers is that we or our supply chain partners that are signing those transactions under the GEOP program or under other renewable electricity procurement mechanisms know that we can track and verify the megawatt hours that are purchased, because double counting is a real problem in a lot of markets, and there is a potential for that double counting in the Philippines with this kind of cloudiness of how RECs are handled right now. So to me, that I don't claim to be an expert in the Philippines electricity market, but to me, that's the one issue that seems to rise to the top right now, that if it could be answered and solved, could really unplug and open up and accelerate a lot more corporates coming to the table on the demand side. Marlon, I'm glad you highlighted at the very beginning of this webinar that there's been kind of relative slow uptake of the GEOP, and I think that would be addressing the RECs issue would be one of, if not the largest thing to tackle to help accelerate that slowness.
Thank you, Evan, for sharing your thoughts. And for the benefit of those that are joining us, that have joined us, the issue on RECs relative to GEOP is related to the fact that under the GEOP rules, the RECs would be retained by the distribution utilities for any transaction under the GEOP. So there's also other rules like that in net metering and others that involves the distribution utility retaining the RECs, and so there's the issue of double counting mentioned by Evan relates to a possible double counting on treating the RECs for the domestic compliance market as well as for international renewable energy procurement rules. So that needs to be resolved soon as part of the issues that need to be tackled. I see Christine nodding and agreeing. Is that something that you are also observing and have noted in your own RE journey as regards the RECs issue?
Yes, we are fully aligned with you. But again, once the options are not accessible, this is a limitation. And then you see on the supply side, which is not as accessible in comparison to the demand. So given these limitations, we are limited with REC. So I fully agree with everyone that there is an opportunity there.
Okay, thank you.
I'm also interested. I'd like to also echo what Evan said earlier. It's more really a political issue here in the Philippines. And maybe there are also some best practices that we could learn from other countries. Clearly what's been presented, the demand is there from the corporates. This opportunity to work with our supply chain. So we definitely want to bring in everyone. But there's really limitation in terms of maybe their supply, but in between is something really we should work on as multi-stakeholders. So I think it's really important for us to bring government in and more of the suppliers also in this story.
Thank you so much. So yeah, we have a raised hand here. And after calling Ms. Alma Rojas Aguila, I'll also would like to hear the thoughts of our colleague Rowan de la Cruz to share her thoughts on or questions that she may have on the information and insights shared so far. Alma, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, thank you. Well, first, thank you for the panelists. I'm actually interested to understand how we, the suppliers, can participate in this GEOP and whether or not the type of technology that I belong to or the specific technology that we supply would be able to cater in GEOP. So basically, I work as the development director for the Philippines of Choreo Generation. It's the offshore wind company of Macquarie Group. So knowing that offshore wind projects are basically in huge capacity.
Alma, sorry, we're running, we're constrained with time, but to answer, sorry for cutting you off, but definitely we can reach out to you offline for this question. Offshore wind is qualified to supply under the GEOP, and we can share with you the materials establishing the GEOP rules so that you could review it further. But definitely there's offshore wind and other wind projects are qualified under GEOP. So that's something that we can interface with you after this webinar, after this call, sorry. Rowan, any thoughts? You're also in the retail sector. Some of the challenges and opportunities relevant to you, and what solutions could you highlight as part of your sustainability journey as well?
Okay, first of all, good morning to everyone, and thank you very much to our three speakers. I have heard, so I really admire the strategies from Nestle and from REI, and also from Elazoo. I think the green lease is a very exciting option for us. To be honest, I could only think of the challenges that we are facing being a global retail company. We are scaling up to several stores in the Philippines, nationwide, but majority of our stores are within the facility of a developer. So even though we have this strategy of reducing our carbon emission by 90%, there is this big roadblock in terms of scope 2. So we're actually very limited. Well, we are limited to buying RECs annually. And these RECs prices increase also annually. So our annual budget also has to catch up. So we're also thinking now of a more sustainable solutions and how to reduce our carbon emissions by getting access to these renewable energy suppliers, or maybe talking and engaging to landlords. Hey, would you like us to put up some solar panels in your roof? Can we do that? And can we, we want to add some of renewable energy to your property, but some of them would still impose rent to us just to put solar panels on their roof. So aside from the PPA cost, monthly, we also have to pay for the roof rent, which is actually, cumulatively higher than what we pay when we are using Meralco. So those are the opportunities we see with regards to the green lease. And I am more interested to know how do you start talking with the landlords? How did you start motivating them, both the landlords and the government, in which country you're doing that already? And is there a strategy that we can make in the Philippines in order to start this? Who do we talk to? Similar to what Christine also asked a while ago. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Rowan. Maybe for the Philippines context, Christine can quickly share some thoughts and ideas, and followed by Evan and Ella. And then we can wrap up the moderate.
I'll answer it quickly. Rowan, I share the same sentiment up until now. As I shared earlier, our pledge is only on scope 1 and scope 2. So this is the sites where we operate. So our commitment to be 100%, to operate on 100% renewable electricity is only involves our scope 1 and scope 2. So what I've seen in how we are greening the supply chain, they share the same concern that you do. Our suppliers, of course, to be profitable, they only lease their land or their building. So they share the same, and I still have the same question as yours. So how do we, if it's not a shared goal with the lessors or with the real estate owners of this country, how can we go to the same agenda?
Thanks, Christine. Evan, thoughts, as well as Ella?
Well, I'm not involved in REI's domestic work, where we do deal with our stores and our retail locations. So I don't have many insights in that, but I think the higher level insight, which we do try to take into account working with our supply chain partners, is putting ourselves in their shoes and think about what motivates them. Why would they be interested in renewable energy or reducing emissions, and working from that angle. So in the case of my day-to-day job and engaging with our supply chain manufacturers across a bunch of different countries, the first step is always just to look for things that will help save them money or earn them money. I think that's the biggest motivator. So there's probably a lot of other tactics underneath that, but that's probably the first thing to start with is our counterpart in this agreement that we have to cooperate with. Are they going to see some cost savings or some earnings? And if you can get to a yes on that, your chances are probably much better. So kind of intuitive or very intuitive, but that's kind of a good rule to always start with.
Thanks, Evan. And Ella, from the solutions that you are familiar with in other markets, how do we, any insights or thoughts to share as regards the challenges and possible solutions raised?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I'll send my email in the chat. I would look forward to engage with each one of you on your challenges or questions, and then see if there are any lessons learned from our work in other countries that could be applied here. And then we're constantly talking with utilities and also talking with government at different levels to engage them and open their mind to different options available, even though not from an advocacy perspective, but from a best practice perspective. So we would like to hear your stories, your feedback, concerns, hear your priorities. And I would say keep the conversation going. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So that with that, we would like to thank our panelists, our colleagues who have joined us today. And we note the work that needs to be done ahead, the work that awaits us ahead. So part of the commitment of the Clean Energy Investment Accelerator is to shepherd this conversation, to form coalitions, and to make sure that we're able to engage with stakeholders, experts, as well as government, to address the challenges that have been identified. So noted on the challenges that we need to address together, we would like to invite our colleagues in industry to continue engaging and working with us as we form working groups to address the issues that we all share. So with that, thank you. We hope to have you again in our next convening. Special thanks to Evan Scandling of REI, Ms. Christine Ponce Garcia of Nestle Philippines, and Ms. Ella Zhou of NREL, as well as our other colleagues who have joined us today. We will send you high-level takeaways from this conversation and to guide us on our next steps ahead. With that, thank you on behalf of my team. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you in our next convening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.